The airport was alive with energy, buzzing like a hive of bees preparing for winter. People moved quickly, dragging suitcases behind them or clutching coffee cups as they hurried to their gates. It was early afternoon, and sunlight streamed through, the large glass windows casting warm golden rays across the polished floors. Among the crowd stood Olivia Carter, a young woman in her late 20s, who had spent the last few days attending back-to-back meetings in Chicago. Her navy blue blazer was slightly wrinkled from travel, but she still looked put together. Her shoulder-length brown hair neatly styled, her makeup minimal but effective. Olivia glanced at her watch. She needed to get home. Work had been stressful lately, and the thought of sinking into her couch with a cup of tea felt like heaven. She adjusted the strap of her laptop bag on her shoulder and walked toward Gate 17, where her flight was scheduled to depart in less than an hour. Everything seemed normal until she reached the boarding area. At the gate, a line of passengers snaked around the corner, each person eager to step onto the plane and escape the chaos of the terminal. Olivia joined the queue, pulling out her phone, to scroll through emails while she waited. When it was finally her turn, she stepped up to the desk and handed her ticket to the flight attendant stationed there. The woman behind the counter was in her mid-40s, with short blonde hair pulled back into a tight bun. Her name tag read Rachel Dawson, and though her uniform was crisp and clean, her expression was anything but welcoming. Rachel took the ticket without so much as a glance at Olivia. Instead, she began typing something into her computer, her lips pressed into a thin line. After what felt like an eternity, she looked up, her eyes narrowing as if trying to place Olivia's face. "You're the one who caused trouble at check-in earlier?" Rachel said abruptly, her tone sharp and accusatory. Olivia blinked, caught off guard by the comment. "I'm sorry, I don't think we've met before," she replied politely, confused by the accusation. "I didn't have any issues during check-in." Rachel shook her head, clearly unconvinced. "Don't play innocent. You were rude to my colleague, and now you're here acting like nothing happened." Her voice carried just enough volume to draw attention from nearby passengers. A few heads turned, curious about the unfolding drama. Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks. This wasn't how she'd imagined her day going. "I honestly don't know what you're talking about," she insisted, her voice steady despite the growing tension. "I checked in online and went straight to security. There was no interaction with anyone from your staff before now." But Rachel wasn't having it. With a huff, she folded her arms across her chest. "Listen, miss, I deal with entitled passengers every day. I can spot them a mile away. If you think throwing attitude around will get you special treatment, you're wrong." The words stung, partly because Olivia knew she wasn't that kind of person. Sure, she came from a comfortable background, but she worked hard for everything she had. She prided herself on being polite and respectful, even when dealing with difficult situations. Yet here she was, being accused of something she hadn't done. "I'm not trying to cause problems," Olivia said firmly, her patience starting to wear thin. "All I want is to board my flight and go home. Can we please move past this?" Rachel ignored her plea. Instead, she picked up the ticket Olivia had handed over moments ago and held it between two fingers, almost as if it were contaminated. Then, without warning, she tore it in half. The sound was sharp and final, cutting through the hum of conversation around them. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some people stared openly, others whispered to their companions. Olivia froze, unable to believe what she'd just witnessed. What did you just do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I told you. I won't tolerate behavior like yours," Rachel snapped, dropping the shredded pieces of paper onto the counter. "You're not getting on this flight." For a moment, Olivia stood rooted to the spot, her mind racing. How could this be happening? She hadn't done anything wrong. And yet, here she was, stranded at the gate with no way to leave. Anger bubbled inside her, but she forced herself to stay calm. Losing her temper wouldn't solve anything. "Fine," she said stiffly, grabbing her belongings. "I'll take this up with someone higher up." Without another word, she turned on her heel and marched away, leaving Rachel smugly watching her retreat. As Olivia made her way to the customer service desk, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out and saw a text from her dad. "How's the trip back? Safe travels." She sighed, debating whether to call him right then and explain what had happened. But something stopped her. For years, she'd tried to prove she could handle things on her own without relying on her family's influence. Admitting defeat now felt like giving up. Still, as she approached the desk and prepared to file a complaint, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that this situation was far from over. Little did she know her father would soon become involved in ways she never expected. What started as a simple misunderstanding was about to spiral into something much bigger, a lesson in humility, privilege, and second chances. And as for Rachel Dawson, she had no idea that tearing up that ticket would change more than just one passenger's travel plans. It would challenge everything she thought she knew about fairness, authority, and the power dynamics hidden beneath the surface of everyday life. Olivia stormed toward the customer service desk, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Her hands tightened around her phone as she replayed the scene at the gate over and over in her mind. How could someone be so unreasonable? She hadn't done anything wrong. She was just trying to catch her flight home. Now, thanks to Rachel Dawson, she was stuck in this chaotic airport with no clear solution. When she reached the desk, she found herself standing behind 3 other passengers, who were also dealing with their own travel issues. One man argued loudly about a missed connection, while another woman pleaded for help finding her misplaced luggage. Olivia sighed, shifting her weight from one foot to the other as she waited. Each passing second felt like an eternity. Finally, it was her turn. The customer service representative behind the desk looked up at her with tired eyes. He was older, maybe in his late 50s, with graying hair and a kind smile that seemed practiced after years of handling difficult situations. His name tag read, "Greg. How can I assist you today?" Greg asked, his voice calm but tinged with exhaustion. Olivia took a deep breath, forcing herself to sound composed despite the storm brewing inside her. "Hi, I'm having trouble boarding my flight," she began. "The flight attendant tore up my ticket because, well, I don't even know why. She accused me of being rude earlier, but I didn't do anything." Greg raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by her story. "That's unusual," he said slowly, typing something into his computer. "Let me check your reservation." As Greg worked, Olivia pulled out her phone and opened her messages. She hesitated for a moment before deciding to call her dad. Richard Bennett wasn't just any dad. He was the founder of Bennett Airlines, though Olivia had never really thought much about it until now. Growing up, she'd always seen him as a hard-working businessman, not some untouchable CEO. To her, he was just dad, someone who gave bad dad jokes and made pancakes on weekends. She dialed his number and waited anxiously as the line rang. On the 3rd ring, he picked up. "Hey, kiddo," he greeted cheerfully. "How's the trip back going?" "Not great," Olivia admitted, lowering her voice so Greg wouldn't overhear. "Something happened at the gate. The flight attendant tore up my ticket and refused to let me board. She said I was rude, but I swear I wasn't." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Richard chuckled softly. "Sounds like quite the situation. Did you tell them who you are?" "No," Olivia exclaimed, almost offended by the suggestion. "I'm not pulling the 'my dad owns the airline' card. That's not how I operate." Richard laughed again, the sound warm and reassuring. "Fair enough. But listen, sweetheart, let me handle this. Where are you right now?" "I'm at the customer service desk," Olivia replied, glancing at Greg, who was still typing away on his computer. "They're checking my reservation." "Okay, stay put. I'll be there soon," Richard said firmly. Before Olivia could protest, he added, "And don't worry, I'll make sure you get on the next available flight." Olivia hung up, feeling a mix of relief and unease. She appreciated her dad stepping in, but part of her wished she could resolve this on her own. Still, she reminded herself that sometimes asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness. It was just practical. While she waited for her dad to arrive, Greg finished reviewing her reservation. He muttered, scratching his chin. "Your ticket seems fine. There's no record of any issues during check-in. Are you sure the flight attendant didn't misunderstand something?" "Yes," Olivia exclaimed, throwing her hands up in exasperation. That's exactly what I've been saying. Greg nodded sympathetically. All right, let me see what I can do. In the meantime, try not to stress too much. These things usually work themselves out. But Olivia wasn't convinced. She glanced around the terminal, noticing the curious stares of nearby passengers. Some looked sympathetic, while others seemed amused by the drama unfolding before them. It was humiliating, and she couldn't wait to leave this place far behind. About 20 minutes later, a tall man in a perfectly tailored navy suit appeared, striding confidently through the crowded terminal. Richard Bennett carried himself with an air of authority, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed, his posture straight and commanding. Despite his polished appearance, there was a warmth to him, a familiarity that made people feel instantly at ease. When he spotted Olivia, his expression softened. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, giving her a quick hug. "You okay?" "I'm fine," Olivia replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. "But this whole thing has been ridiculous." Richard turned his attention to Greg, flashing a polite smile. "Hello, I'm Richard Bennett. My daughter tells me there's been a bit of a misunderstanding here." Greg's eyes widened slightly as recognition dawned. "Oh, Mr. Bennett, it's an honor to meet you." He stood up and extended his hand, which Richard shook firmly. "I was just looking into your daughter's reservation. From what I can see, everything appears to be in order." "That's good to hear," Richard said, his voice calm but firm. "Now, let's go talk to the flight attendant who caused all this trouble." With that, Richard gestured for Olivia to follow him. They walked back to Gate 17, where Rachel Dawson was still stationed. When she saw Richard approaching, she straightened up, smoothing her uniform and plastering on a professional smile. "Good afternoon, sir," Rachel greeted brightly, clearly unaware of who he was. "How may I assist you?" Richard returned, her smile, though his eyes held a hint of steel. "Hello. I understand there was an incident involving my daughter earlier. Perhaps you could explain what happened?" Rachel blinked, taken aback by the question. She glanced at Olivia, then back at Richard. "Well, sir, your daughter was extremely rude to my colleague during check-in. When I confronted her about it, she became defensive. I simply followed protocol by refusing to allow her to board." Olivia opened her mouth to protest, but Richard held up a hand, silencing her. "Interesting," he said, his tone neutral. "And did you happen to confirm these allegations with your colleague?" Rachel hesitated, suddenly looking less confident. "Not directly, no, but I trust her judgment." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "I see. Well, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Richard Bennett, the founder of this airline." He paused, letting the words sink in. Rachel's face went pale, her jaw dropping slightly as realization hit her. "Now, do you still believe my daughter acted rudely?" Rachel stammered, clearly flustered. I didn't realize, I was just doing my job." "I understand," Richard interrupted gently. "But perhaps next time you should verify information before taking drastic actions like tearing up a passenger's ticket. Don't you agree?" Rachel nodded quickly, her cheeks burning with shame. "Yes, sir. Absolutely. I apologize for any inconvenience caused." Richard studied her for a moment longer, then turned to Olivia. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you on the next flight." As they walked away, Olivia glanced back at Rachel, who looked utterly defeated. Part of her felt sorry for the woman. She knew what it was like to make mistakes, but another part couldn't help feeling vindicated. Her dad had handled the situation perfectly, proving once again why he was such a respected leader. Once they were seated in the lounge area, waiting for the next flight, Olivia turned to her dad. "Thanks for stepping in," she said quietly. "I know I should have handled it better, but I just got so frustrated." Richard smiled, patting her hand. "Don't apologize, you did nothing wrong. Sometimes people need reminders about fairness and accountability, that's all." Olivia nodded, grateful for his wisdom. As she watched the planes take off outside the window, she realized this experience had taught her something valuable. Even when life throws unexpected challenges your way, staying calm and seeking guidance can lead to solutions you might not have imagined. And as for Rachel Dawson, she was about to learn a lesson she wouldn't soon forget, one that would change how she viewed her role and responsibilities forever. Back at Bennett Airline's headquarters, Rachel Dawson sat nervously in one of the plush chairs outside Richard Bennett's office. Her mind raced as she replayed the events of the day over and over again. How could she have been so blind? She'd thought she was doing her job, standing up to an entitled passenger who didn't deserve special treatment. But now, sitting here in this grand building surrounded by executives and assistants bustling about, she realized just how wrong she had been. When a secretary finally called her into Richard's office, Rachel stood up shakily, smoothing out her uniform before stepping inside. The room was impressive. A wide desk made of dark wood faced floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city skyline, bathed in golden evening light. Richard sat behind the desk, his posture relaxed but authoritative. Beside him stood two men in suits, their expressions unreadable. One of them held a folder containing what looked like documents related to employee conduct. "Please have a seat," Richard said, gesturing toward the chair across from him. His voice was calm, almost kind, but there was an underlying firmness that made Rachel feel even more uneasy. She obeyed, perching on the edge of the chair as if ready to bolt at any moment. Her hands trembled slightly, so she clasped them together in her lap to hide it. "Mr. Bennett, I want to apologize again for what happened earlier," she began, her voice wavering. "I truly didn't mean to cause trouble." Richard nodded, slowly, studying her carefully. "Rachel, let me start by saying I appreciate your dedication to our airline. It's clear you care about maintaining standards and treating passengers fairly. That's important to us. It's part of why we've built such a strong reputation over the years." Rachel swallowed hard, unsure where this was going. Was he letting her off the hook? Or was this the calm before the storm? "But," Richard continued, leaning forward slightly, "there are certain expectations when working for Bennett Airlines. We value professionalism, respect, and accountability above all else. Tearing up a passenger's ticket, especially without verifying the facts, is not acceptable behavior. Do you understand why that decision was problematic?" Rachel nodded quickly, tears welling up in her eyes. "Yes, sir. I see that now. I acted too hastily and I regret it deeply." Richard studied her for a moment longer, then glanced at the two executives beside him. They exchanged brief nods, signaling some unspoken agreement. Finally, he turned, back to Rachel. "Here's the thing," he said, his tone softening slightly. "Mistakes happen. We're all human. What matters is how we learn from them and grow. So instead of firing you outright, I'd like to give you an opportunity to make things right." Rachel blinked, surprised by his words. "An opportunity?" she repeated hesitantly. "Yes," Richard confirmed. "Starting tomorrow, you'll be assigned to assist my daughter, Olivia, for the next month. She works closely with our customer relations team and has first-hand experience dealing with challenging situations like the one you encountered today. You'll shadow her, help her manage complaints, and gain insight into the bigger picture of what we do here. This will also give you a chance to understand the impact of your actions on both our passengers and the company as a whole." Rachel felt a mix of emotions: relief that she wasn't being fired, gratitude for the second chance, but also apprehension about working directly under Olivia after everything that had happened. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett," she said sincerely. "I promise I'll do my best to learn from this experience and prove myself." Richard smiled faintly, though his gaze remained steady. "Good. I expect nothing less. Now take the rest of the day to reflect on what we've discussed. Tomorrow morning, report to Olivia's office at 9 sharp. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Rachel replied, standing up and straightening her shoulders. She gave a small bow before leaving the room, her heart pounding with equal parts fear and determination. The next morning, Rachel arrived at Olivia's office promptly at 9. The space was modern and inviting, with large windows letting in natural light and shelves lined with books and framed photos. Olivia sat at her desk, typing away on her laptop when Rachel knocked lightly on the doorframe. Olivia looked up, her expression neutral. "Hi, Rachel," she greeted evenly. "Come on in." Rachel stepped inside, clutching a notebook and pen, like lifelines. "Good morning, Olivia. Thank you for agreeing to work with me." Olivia nodded, closing her laptop and motioning for Rachel to take a seat. "No problem. My dad explained the situation, and honestly, I think this could be a good learning experience for both of us." Rachel blinked, caught off guard by Olivia's openness. "For both of us?" she echoed uncertainly. "Well, yeah," Olivia said with a small smile. "You'll get to see how we handle customer complaints in tough situations, and maybe I'll learn something about patience and perspective. It goes both ways." Rachel felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this wouldn't be as awkward or painful as she'd feared. "That sounds fair," she admitted. "I really am sorry for what happened at the gate. I let my assumptions cloud my judgment, and I shouldn't have." Olivia tilted her head, considering her words. "I appreciate the apology. Honestly, I was pretty upset at first, but now I'm just glad we can move forward. Let's focus on making the most of this opportunity, okay?" Rachel nodded eagerly. "Absolutely. I'm ready to learn." Over the next few days, Olivia threw herself into teaching Rachel the ins and outs of customer relations. They started with basic tasks, like reviewing feedback forms and responding to emails from dissatisfied passengers. Olivia explained the importance of empathy and active listening, emphasizing that every complaint, even the seemingly unreasonable ones, deserved attention and care. At first, Rachel struggled to adapt. Years of working in high-pressure environments had trained her to prioritize efficiency over connection, and breaking that habit wasn't easy. But Olivia was patient, offering guidance without judgment whenever Rachel stumbled. One afternoon, they tackled a particularly difficult case together, a passenger who had missed his flight due to a miscommunication with baggage handlers. The man was furious, demanding compensation and threatening to leave scathing reviews online. Rachel instinctively bristled at his tone, ready to defend the airline against what she saw as unfair accusations. But Olivia stopped her before she could respond. "Wait," she said gently. "Let's try approaching this differently. Instead of focusing on what went wrong, let's acknowledge his frustration and offer solutions. Sometimes people just want to feel heard." With Olivia's encouragement, Rachel drafted a response that acknowledged the passenger's concerns, apologized for the inconvenience, and offered a voucher for a future flight. To her surprise, the man replied within hours, thanking them for their understanding and saying he'd give Bennett Airlines another chance. "That was amazing," Rachel said afterward, genuinely impressed. "I never would have thought to handle it like that." Olivia grinned. "See? Small changes can make a big difference. It's all about perspective." As the weeks went by, Rachel began to notice subtle shifts in her mindset. She found herself pausing before reacting, taking the time to consider other viewpoints instead of jumping to conclusions. She also started asking questions about the airline's policies, its history, and even Olivia's role within the company. Through these conversations, she learned that Olivia hadn't always known her father owned the airline. In fact, she'd grown up thinking of him simply as a hardworking dad who sometimes came home late from the office. "It must have been weird finding out later," Rachel commented one day as they reviewed a stack of customer surveys. Olivia laughed softly. "Yeah, it was definitely a shock. But honestly, it doesn't change who I am or how I approach things. I still have to earn my place just like everyone else." Rachel nodded thoughtfully. For the first time, she realized how much pressure Olivia must feel, not just from her job, but from living up to her family's legacy. It made her reflect on her own life and the judgments she'd made about others based on appearances alone. By the end of the month, Rachel felt like a completely different person. She no longer viewed passengers as adversaries, but as individuals, with unique stories and challenges. And while she still had moments of doubt, she knew she was growing into a better version of herself, one who valued compassion and accountability above all else. When their assignment officially ended, Olivia invited Rachel to lunch to celebrate. Over sandwiches and coffee, They talked about everything they'd learned from each other. "I'm really proud of how far you've come," Olivia said sincerely. "You've handled some tough situations with grace and maturity. Keep that up, and you'll go far." Rachel smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you, Olivia, for everything. I couldn't have done it without your guidance and your patience." As they parted ways, Rachel walked back to her car with a renewed sense of purpose. She knew mistakes were inevitable, but she also knew they didn't define her. What mattered was how she chose to grow from them, and thanks to Olivia and Richard, she now had the tools to do just that. This experience had changed her in ways she never expected, proving that sometimes the hardest lessons lead to the greatest growth. By the end of the month, Rachel Dawson had undergone a transformation, not just in her skills but in her mindset. Working alongside Olivia Carter had opened her eyes to aspects of the airline industry she'd never considered before. Every day brought new challenges and lessons, each one chipping away at the rigid assumptions Rachel had held for years. One morning, as they reviewed customer complaints together, Rachel hesitated before asking a question that had been on her mind for days. "Olivia," she began cautiously, "how do you stay so calm when people are yelling at you? I mean, doesn't it bother you?" Olivia leaned back in her chair, considering the question. "Of course it bothers me sometimes," she admitted. "No one likes being yelled at or accused of things they didn't do. But I've learned that anger usually comes from frustration or fear. If someone's upset, it's because something important to them has gone wrong. A missed flight, lost luggage, whatever. Once I remind myself of that, it's easier to focus on solving the problem instead of taking their words personally." Rachel nodded slowly, absorbing the advice. It made sense, but putting it into practice wasn't always easy. Still, she was determined to try. Over the past few weeks, she'd seen firsthand how Olivia's approach diffused tense situations and turned angry customers into satisfied ones. She wanted to be like that, calm, confident, and effective. Later that afternoon, they tackled another challenging case. A family had arrived at the airport only to discover their seats had been reassigned due to an overbooking error. The parents were livid, accusing the airline of ruining their vacation plans. When Rachel read their email, her first instinct was to defend the company's policy. But then she remembered Olivia's earlier advice. Instead of drafting a defensive response, Rachel wrote a heartfelt apology. She acknowledged the inconvenience caused, explained the steps the airline was taking to prevent similar issues in the future, and offered complimentary upgrades for their next trip. To her surprise, the family replied within hours, expressing gratitude for the gesture and saying they'd continue flying with Bennett Airlines. When Rachel showed the exchange to Olivia, her mentor smiled proudly. "See? You're getting the hang of this. Empathy goes a long way." As the days passed, Rachel noticed subtle changes not only in her work but also in how she interacted with others. She started paying closer attention to the passengers she encountered during her shifts at the gate. Instead of seeing them as faceless travelers rushing through the terminal, she began recognizing their individual stories. The tired mother juggling a toddler and carry-on bags, the elderly couple holding hands as they navigated the crowded halls, the college student nervously checking his watch before his first solo flight. These small observations helped Rachel understand why her job mattered. It wasn't just about enforcing rules or keeping schedules. It was about making people feel cared for, even in the midst of chaos. And while she still made mistakes occasionally, she no longer feared them. Each misstep became an opportunity to learn and improve. One evening, after a particularly busy day, Rachel and Olivia found themselves sitting side by side in the break room. They sipped coffee and talked about everything from work to personal life. Rachel confessed that she'd always assumed people like Olivia, well-dressed, polished, and seemingly perfect, had it easy. She'd envied their confidence and success. Without realizing the hard work behind it, Olivia laughed softly. "Trust me, it's not all smooth sailing. Sure, my dad owns the airline, but that doesn't mean I get handed anything on a silver platter. If anything, it adds pressure. People expect more from me because of who he is. Sometimes it feels like I'm constantly proving myself to him, to coworkers, even to strangers. Rachel listened intently, feeling a pang of guilt. She'd judged Olivia based on appearances, just like she'd judged countless passengers over the years. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't realize how tough it must be for you." "It's okay," Olivia replied with a shrug. "You weren't the first person to make assumptions about me, and you won't be the last. What matters is that we're both here now, learning from each other." Their conversation deepened as they discussed their shared experiences of growing up in families where expectations loomed large. Rachel revealed that her own parents had pushed her toward a career in aviation, hoping she'd rise quickly through the ranks. While she loved her job, she often felt like she was failing to live up to their dreams for her. "I think we all struggle with that in some way," Olivia said thoughtfully. "Trying to balance what others want for us with what we truly want for ourselves. It's messy, but it's part of figuring out who we are." Rachel nodded, grateful for the honesty. For the first time in years, she felt understood, not judged or criticized, but genuinely heard. It was a rare gift, one she vowed to pay forward whenever possible. As the final week of their assignment approached, Rachel threw herself into her tasks with renewed energy. She volunteered to assist with training new employees, sharing the insights she'd gained from Olivia. She also took the initiative to propose improvements to the airline's customer service protocols, suggesting ways to streamline communication between departments and reduce errors. Her efforts didn't go unnoticed. During a team meeting, Richard Bennett praised Rachel publicly for her dedication and progress. "Rachel has shown incredible growth over the past month," he announced. "She's embraced every challenge with humility and determination, and I believe she has a bright future ahead of her." The acknowledgement filled Rachel with pride, but it also humbled her. She knew she still had much to learn, but for the first time in a long while, she felt hopeful about her career and herself. On their last day working together, Olivia handed Rachel a small gift-wrapped box. "This is for you," she said with a smile, "to celebrate everything you've accomplished." Rachel opened it carefully, revealing a leather-bound journal embossed with the words "Lessons Learned." Tears welled up in her eyes as she flipped through the blank pages. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'll treasure this forever." "You've earned it," Olivia replied warmly. "And remember, this isn't goodbye. We're colleagues now, and hopefully friends too." Rachel nodded, smiling despite the lump in her throat. Definitely friends. As they parted ways that evening, Rachel walked out of the office with a newfound sense of purpose. She knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but she was ready to face whatever came her way. With empathy, resilience, and the lessons she'd gained along the way. This experience had taught her that everyone makes mistakes, but those mistakes don't define us. What matters is how we choose to grow from them. And thanks to Olivia and Richard, Rachel had discovered not only her potential, but also the power of second chances. Little did she know, the lessons she'd learned would continue to shape her journey in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Months had passed since Rachel Dawson completed her assignment with Olivia Carter, but the lessons she learned during that time continued to shape her life both personally and professionally. What started as a punishment turned into an opportunity, a chance to grow, reflect, and redefine how she approached her role at Bennett Airlines. Rachel now worked in customer relations full-time, a position Richard Bennett had offered her after seeing her progress. It wasn't just a promotion, it was a vote of confidence. Every day, she applied the skills she'd developed under Olivia's guidance, listening actively, responding with empathy, and finding solutions rather than assigning blame. Her colleagues noticed the change too. Where once she'd been quick-tempered and rigid, she was now calm and adaptable, earning their respect in ways she never imagined possible. One crisp autumn morning, Rachel found herself back at Gate 17, the very spot where everything had gone wrong months earlier. This time, however, she wasn't there as a gate agent. She was observing new employees, offering tips on handling difficult situations. As she watched a young man struggle to explain a delay to an irate passenger, memories of her own mistakes flooded back. She remembered the frustration she'd felt when passengers challenged her authority. the impatience that had led her to act without thinking. But most of all, she remembered how Olivia had taught her to see beyond surface level anger and recognize the emotions beneath it. After the confrontation ended, Rachel pulled the young man aside. "Hey," she said gently, "can we talk for a minute?" He nodded nervously, clearly expecting criticism. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, not at all," Rachel assured him. "You handled yourself well, especially considering how upset that passenger was. But let me share something I've learned over the years. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Next time, try starting with an apology. Even if the situation isn't your fault, it disarms them and opens the door for a more productive conversation." The young man looked thoughtful, nodding slowly. "That makes sense. Thanks, Rachel. I'll keep that in mind." As he walked away, Rachel couldn't help but smile. Teaching others reminded her of how far she'd come, and how much she owed to Olivia and Richard for believing in her potential. Later that week, Rachel received an email from Olivia inviting her to lunch. They hadn't seen each other regularly since their month together, though they occasionally exchanged messages or caught up briefly in passing. Rachel eagerly accepted the invitation, curious about what Olivia wanted to discuss. They met at a quiet cafe near the airport, its cozy interior providing a welcome escape from the hustle and bustle outside. Over steaming cups of tea, they reminisced about the ups and downs of their time working together. "You've really blossomed in your new role," Olivia said, her tone warm and encouraging. "I've heard nothing but good things about you." "Thanks to you," Rachel replied sincerely. "If it weren't for you, I might have lost my job, or worse, stayed stuck in the same mindset. You helped me see things differently." Olivia shrugged modestly. "All I did was point you in the right direction. The hard work was all yours." Their conversation eventually turned to broader topics: changes happening within the airline industry, challenges facing employees and passengers alike, and the importance of fostering a culture of kindness. Rachel opened up about her struggles, balancing work and personal life, admitting that she sometimes felt overwhelmed by the weight of expectations. "I get that," Olivia said sympathetically. "It's tough when everyone seems to want something from you. But here's the thing. You're allowed to set boundaries. Saying no doesn't make you weak, it makes you human." Rachel nodded, grateful for the reminder. For so long, she'd equated success with perfection, striving to meet every demand without considering her own needs. Hearing Olivia validate, her feelings gave her permission to prioritize self-care without guilt. Before parting ways, Olivia handed Rachel a small envelope. "This is for you," she said with a mischievous grin. "Don't open it until you're home." Curious, but obedient, Rachel tucked the envelope into her bag and thanked Olivia for the thoughtful gesture. When she finally opened it later that evening, she discovered 2 tickets inside, one for herself and one for a guest, to attend a leadership conference hosted by Bennett Airlines later that year. A note accompanied the tickets. "You've earned this. Keep inspiring others." Tears welled up in Rachel's eyes as she read the words. She'd spent years doubting her abilities, convinced she wasn't cut out for anything beyond routine tasks. Now she realized she had the power to influence those around her, not through authority or intimidation, but through compassion and understanding. In the weeks leading up to the conference, Rachel prepared diligently, determined to make the most of the opportunity. She researched keynote speakers, drafted questions for panel discussions, and even practiced giving a short presentation on conflict resolution strategies she'd developed. The idea of speaking in front of hundreds of people terrified her, but she reminded herself of Olivia's advice: focus on helping others, and the nerves will fade. When the day of the conference arrived, Rachel stood backstage, clutching her notes and taking deep breaths to steady her racing heart. As she waited for her turn to speak, she glanced out at the audience and spotted Olivia sitting in the front row, giving her an encouraging thumbs up. The sight calmed her nerves instantly. Stepping onto the stage, Rachel began her presentation, with a story, her own. She recounted the incident at Gate 17, describing how she'd torn up a passenger's ticket in anger and faced consequences she hadn't anticipated. She spoke candidly about the shame and embarrassment she'd felt, but also about the growth that followed. By the end of her speech, the room was silent except for the sound of pens scribbling furiously in notebooks. When she finished, the crowd erupted into applause. People lined up afterward to thank her for sharing her experience, many saying they'd faced similar struggles and found hope in her story. For Rachel, it was validation unlike anything she'd ever known. That night, as she reflected on the day's events, Rachel realized something profound. Second chances aren't just about fixing mistakes, they're about becoming better versions of ourselves. And sometimes, the greatest gift we can give others is proof that change is possible. Little did Rachel know, her journey was far from over. The lessons she'd learned would continue to ripple outward, touching lives in ways she couldn't yet imagine. But for now, she was content knowing she'd transformed not only her own path but also the paths of those around her. Her story was no longer one of failure. It was one of redemption, resilience, and the enduring power of human connection. As weeks turned into months, Rachel Dawson continued to thrive in her role at Bennett Airlines. Her journey from a defensive gate agent to a respected member of the customer relations team had been challenging, but rewarding. She no longer saw herself as someone who simply followed rules. Instead, she viewed her job as an opportunity to make a difference, to turn frustration into understanding and anger into gratitude. One sunny afternoon, Rachel received an email from Richard Bennett, requesting a meeting. At first, she felt a flicker of nervousness. Had she done something wrong? But when she arrived at his office, she found him seated behind his desk with a warm smile on his face. Beside him stood Olivia, holding a folder marked Employee Recognition Program. "Rachel, please sit down," Richard said, gesturing toward a chair. His tone was friendly, putting her immediately at ease. "We wanted to discuss something important with you." Curious but calm, Rachel took a seat. "Of course, Mr. Bennett. What's this about?" Richard leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "Over the past year, you've shown remarkable growth, not just in your skills but in your attitude. You've become a leader among your peers, someone others look up to. That's why we're promoting you to Manager of Customer Relations." Rachel froze, stunned by the announcement. I don't know what to say," she stammered, her voice trembling with emotion. "Thank you so much. I never thought I'd be here." "You earned it," Richard replied firmly. "And I believe you'll excel in this position. But there's one condition." He glanced at Olivia, who handed Rachel the folder. Inside were details about a mentorship program designed to train new employees using real-life scenarios based on past challenges, including Rachel's own experience at Gate 17. "We want you to lead this initiative," Olivia explained. "Your story is proof that mistakes can lead to growth. By sharing your journey, you'll inspire others to approach their work with empathy and accountability." Tears welled up in Rachel's eyes as she processed the weight of the responsibility being placed in her hands. "I'd be honored," she whispered, clutching the folder tightly. "Thank you for trusting me." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity as Rachel prepared to take on her new role. She collaborated with Olivia to design training modules, incorporating interactive exercises and role-playing scenarios to help employees navigate difficult situations. Together, they created a program that emphasized not only technical skills, but also emotional intelligence, the ability to connect with people on a human level. During one of their planning sessions, Olivia turned to Rachel with a thoughtful expression. "You know, I've been thinking about something," she said. "When all of this started, neither of us expected it to go this far. But now, looking back, I think it changed both of us in ways we didn't anticipate." Rachel nodded, reflecting on how much she'd grown since that fateful day at the gate. "Absolutely. I used to see passengers as problems to solve, not people with feelings. Now I realize every interaction is an opportunity to listen, to learn, and to grow." Olivia smiled, her eyes softening. "That's exactly why you're perfect for this role. You understand what it means to start over and rebuild. And you're living proof that second chances aren't just possible, they're powerful." As the mentorship program launched, Rachel threw herself into her new responsibilities with enthusiasm. She led workshops, conducted one-on-one coaching sessions, and even gave presentations at industry conferences. Her speeches resonated deeply with audiences, many of whom approached her afterward to share their own stories of redemption and resilience. One evening, after a particularly successful training session, Rachel found herself standing at Gate 17 once again. It was quieter now, the chaos of travelers replaced by a peaceful stillness. She closed her eyes, remembering the fear and shame she'd felt that day. So much had changed since then, not just in her career, but in her heart. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "Mind if I join you?" Rachel opened her eyes to see Olivia standing nearby holding 2 cups of coffee. She smiled, accepting one gratefully. "Thanks. I was just thinking about how different things are now." Olivia nodded, sipping her drink. "It's funny, isn't it? This place holds so many memories, for both of us." "For me, it's a reminder of where I started," Rachel admitted, "but also of how far I've come. I wouldn't trade this journey for anything." They stood in silence for a moment, watching as a plane taxied down the runway and lifted gracefully into the sky. The sight filled Rachel with a sense of hope and possibility. Life, like travel, was unpredictable, but every detour brought new opportunities to learn and grow. Before leaving, Olivia turned to Rachel with a grin. "By the way, my dad wanted me to tell you something. He said he's proud of you, and that if you ever need advice, his door is always open." Rachel laughed softly, touched by the gesture. "Tell him thank you. For everything." As Olivia walked away, Rachel lingered a little longer, soaking in the quiet beauty of the terminal. She knew her journey wasn't perfect. There would always be challenges ahead, but she faced them with confidence now. She'd learned that mistakes weren't failures. They were stepping stones toward becoming the best version of yourself. Later that night, as Rachel sat at home reflecting on the day, she opened the leather-bound journal Olivia had given her months earlier. Flipping through its pages, she realized it was nearly full, filled with notes, reflections, and reminders of lessons learned along the way. On the last blank page, she wrote a single sentence: "Every ending is a new beginning." With that, Rachel closed the journal and set it aside, feeling a deep sense of peace. Her story wasn't just about redemption or growth. It was about connection, about seeing the humanity in others and recognizing it in yourself. And though she couldn't predict what the future held, she knew one thing for certain. She was ready to face it head-on, armed with compassion, resilience, and the unwavering belief that everyone deserved a second chance. Far above, another plane soared across the horizon, carrying passengers to destinations unknown. Each traveler carried their own story, their own struggles and triumphs. And somewhere aboard that flight, perhaps another journey of transformation was beginning. A reminder that life, like the skies, was vast and full of endless possibilities.